That's not good. I can't see the comment section. Oh. 1 second, everyone. I cannot see the comment section whatsoever. 1 second. Joe, good to see how you're doing. How you been? Pablo, good to see you as well. Just 1 second. Nobody comments. Let me see why I can't see the comment section. Sorry about this, everyone. I cannot see the comment section whatsoever. 1 second. Now I can see the comment section. So, hi everyone, how you doing? I can see from Manny's comment, and that's about it. So when Manny put a comment, even amounts of CMF, I can see that. I can't see anybody else's comment. So if you did put a comment, said hi, sorry about that. What's up, Miles? Funky brother, good to see you. How you doing? Good day, Miles, the CMF. Mike, good to see you. How you doing? Hi, Miles. How was your weekend? It was good. It was a very interesting weekend, I would have to say. Good evening, Miles, the CMF. Orphan, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Scott, good to see you. How you doing? Yeah, genuinely apologize. I couldn't see the comment section at the beginning, but now I can see it, but I can't see anything before. Manage. Who brought the dip? Let's go, Stormy. Facts. Who brought the dip? I'm guessing everybody did at this point. Any dip that comes along right now, moments like this, is a blessing in disguise, to be fairly honest. So, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Mouse Family. My name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards for the most recent updates on cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations, pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As on this live as well, which means if you do have any questions or statements, put it down in the comment section. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Also, the disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. And on tonight's live show, we have a mixture of news to go through, as always. Essentially, news regarding the pressure that's put onto Bitcoin right now, and the two pools essentially that are dominating the factor. We have news regarding essentially the SEC, some international news to go through on tonight's live, is also market pressure news to go through on tonight's live. And of course, as always, Ripple news to go through on tonight's live as well. Now, before we go for the first news, which is regarding the pressure Bitcoin is facing right now, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into the first news. As I said, I can now see the comment section. I couldn't see it before, but now I can see it clearly. Let's see where we're at. We were at here. Hello, Miles CMF. Let's go, Scott. Miles, hope all went well with your meeting yesterday. Thank you so much. Yesterday, I had a business event that I attended to. I'm trying to get the CoinMove name out there. I'm trying to, essentially get more partnerships involved, more VC companies involved. And if I can, someday maybe land Ripple as a partner. That would be a dream come true, to land Ripple as a partner, to be fairly honest, for CoinMove. Good evening, Miles, the CMF family. Good to see you as well, Funky. How you doing? Can you read now? I can read now, yes. Just think, Miles. I was first on X today. Let's go, Scott. Hello, my friend. Good to see you as well. Hello, my friend. Hi, Miles. Hi, Scott. Good evening, Miles. How are you doing? I'm doing great. There's no giveaways. Good afternoon, Miles, the CMF. Good to see you back, Miles. Let's go, Carlos. How you doing? Miles, why are we getting all the red for the last few days? Well, because the market hasn't had any sort of good news, to be fairly honest. I mean, we had the Trump essentially and Putin discussions, which nothing really came out of it. Everything happened behind closed doors. We've also had, essentially, are we going to get rate cuts? Are we not going to get rate cuts? And by the looks of it, Jerome Powell isn't giving any indications of a rate cut happening essentially in September, which again isn't good news for the market space, to be fairly honest. And also the news coming out today that Bitcoin's being dominated by two pools, and if it becomes compromised, then it could be ending very bad for Bitcoin. That doesn't really help in the factor of the crypto space either. There's quite a bit of news on why the market is down, but you got to know, in general, the market is going to be up as we move further on because of the regulations that are coming in place, amount of institutions. We have the multitude of ETFs still filings on the SEC desk. There's so many positive things still to come that these minor situations are really going to be staying minor. Now, before we go through the first news, as I said, let's go inside the comment section again. Good evening, CMF, free and forever. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles of CMF. How did your day go today? Brilliant, Joe. How did your day go? From your mouth to God's ears, Miles. Blessing to you, and I'm keeping you and your business in my prayers. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely amazing. Shelly, good. Stormy, thank you so much for keeping me in your prayers and my company. Morning, Miles and CMF. Shelly, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles. Free and forever. Good to see you. How you doing? Somebody block this moron. Block user on YouTube. Yes. I don't know who this ding dong person is, but it's been removed. Now, if the CMF could please just in the chat right now put rocket emojis, thumbs up emojis, fire emojis. Let's get things rallied up. Also, because I don't want anybody to see ding dong as the first comment when they come into this live, whoever this moron was. Hope you had a great day. Good to see you. So, Mike, how you doing? Let's go. Now, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is facing right now intense, apparently, selling pressures as support gathers around $105,000. Also, I just want to say 1 second, just take 1 second to say thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has already liked and retweeted this live on X, if you're watching this on X. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much to everybody who's also liked the live as well. And let me go and pin this live right now on my profile, and then we'll go back to the first news. So 1 second, everyone. Let me just pin the live. So that's the first thing everybody sees when they come into the live. Okay, here it is. Pin to profile. Pin. Brilliant. It's pinned. And also, so far, we have 7 likes and 6 retweets on X. CMF members, if you haven't liked or retweeted, please like and retweet this live. So far, we have 6 likes and 7 retweets. Now, Bitcoin faces essentially intense selling pressures as support gathers around $105,000. Bitcoin is experiencing notable sell pressure right now, with essentially key bid supports forming around $105,000 level, aimed at prevailing market uncertainty according to technical charts and institutional analysis. The situation highlights significant market dynamics as institutions accumulate price movements are not doing too well on Bitcoin side, or to be fairly honest, on Ethereum side, especially on the ETFs. News came out today that BlackRock might have sold a substantial amount of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is also experiencing significant sell-off pressures as crucial bid support accumulates around $105,000. This price level essentially reflects heightened, essentially, market uncertainty and technical significance. Recent, essentially, technical charts, ETF inflows, data from essentially charts and analyst commentary confirm these trends. BlackRock and Metaplanet are key players in this current scenario right now. BlackRock has seen major inflows into their iShares Bitcoin Trust, assuming essentially $3.77 billion in net ETF inflows just back in June. Meanwhile, Metaplanet acquired 463 Bitcoins at an average price of $115,895. These actions essentially underline streak accumulation at current levels, influencing institutional sentiment is still there. However, today news came out that BlackRock has sold roughly about $68 million worth of Bitcoin. The sell pressure on Bitcoin is impacting other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, which is also experiencing right now rapid exchange outflows. This situation has led to speculation about potential price breakouts. Furthermore, essentially long-term holders are committing to Bitcoin, with exchange reserves hitting essentially multi-year lows, suggesting increased holder conviction. The ETF inflow data from CoinCentral indicates strong institutional participation is still there for Bitcoin, even though we're going through some essentially minor bumps right now. Bitcoin's price behavior is under watch by market analysts and investors. Technical analysis suggests that potential outcomes based on historical behavior. Analysts indicate that rising wedge pattern with a break below, essentially possibly accelerating Bitcoin's decline towards $105,000. Bitcoin could reach $312,000 before crashing to 76% to $75,000 in 2026. Apparently, according to multiple analysts. Now, what's also happening is that the recent reports from WhaleWire on X have sent ripples through the cryptocurrency community right now, highlighting a significant development in the world of Bitcoin. For the first time in over a decade, just 2 Bitcoin mining pools now collectively command more than 51% of the network's total Bitcoin hash rate, which isn't great, because it goes back to the question of, is Bitcoin really decentralized or is it technically centralized? This concentration of power immediately essentially sparks urgent discussions about the foundational security and decentralized nature of Bitcoin. What exactly does this concentration mean? When a single entity, or essentially including group, controls over 50% of a blockchain's network computing power, in this case Bitcoin, they essentially theoretically gain the ability to manipulate the network. This scenario is widely referred to as the 51% attack. Such an attack on the Bitcoin network could have severe consequences. Double spending. An attacker could essentially spend their Bitcoins, then reverse the transaction on the blockchain, effectively spending the same coins twice, which isn't great for Bitcoin's essentially credibility. Transaction censorship. They could essentially prevent specific transactions from being confirmed, effectively looking to blocking users or services because they control 51% of the network. Chain essentially recognition of an attacker might reverse essentially recent transactions, potentially disrupting the integrity of the Bitcoin ledger. While theoretically the mere possibility raises legitimate essentially concerns among investors and enthusiasts alike regarding the robustness of Bitcoin's security model. So it seems like that essentially Bitcoin's network might be in trouble because 51% of the network is now being controlled by 2 mining pools that have too much power. And if they get compromised, or if they do the essentially attacking from the inside, the credibility of Bitcoin will go from here to here, which will cause a massive sell-off if that happens. That's if that happens. Now, that's also not a good factor, which is also weighing in on the market situation for Bitcoin right now. And as usual, we still don't have the regulations we need for the rest of the market to move on from Bitcoin and decouple themselves on Bitcoin. We still need the Clarity Act to be passed, which is going to be around September 30th by the looks of it. We still need the anti-CBDC Act to be passed and a few other laws for crypto space so they can decouple from Bitcoin's footsteps. And then after that, whatever happens to Bitcoin, happens to Bitcoin. Nobody cares unless you're holding Bitcoin. If you're holding alternative assets going into utility, you're perfectly fine. Now, because of all the controversial situations that are happening right now inside the crypto space, South Korea essentially recently introduced the idea of lending when it comes to cryptocurrencies, lending and borrowing, which now they've paused due to finding out how volatile the crypto space can become, especially in the past few days. So, South Korean financial authorities have temporarily halted new crypto lending services following a major liquidation incident inside the crypto markets. The decision essentially is seen as a reflection of global concerns about the risk of rising essentially leverages inside the digital asset market space. The decision essentially by the country's Financial Services Commission, FSC, follows an incident at the local essentially exchange Bithumb. Regulators revealed that more than 27,000 users used this lending services in June alone, with 13% of the users forced into liquidation due to the market fluctuations of price. Authorities announced that crypto lending services would be suspended until a virtual asset leasing services guide was prepared. The statement stated that the user protection mechanism are inadequate in that sense, and there are essentially concerns about harming healthy commerce. Now, meanwhile, Galaxy Digital's latest report revealed that the leverage usage in rapidly increasing crypto ecosystems. According to the report, the total value of crypto collateralized debt across both centralized and decentralized projects has reached $44.25 billion, representing nearly 30% increase compared to previous quarters. So, even though essentially lending services and borrowing services from South Korea essentially have come to a halt, according to the data that just came out from Galaxy Digital, 30% increase on lending and borrowing services regarding cryptocurrencies in centralized exchanges or decentralized platforms in that sense. However, South Korea coming to their senses that maybe essentially we need better guidance for lending and borrowing, so the majority don't get liquidated. It's actually a great idea that they've paused it, to be fairly honest. Because also, to add on top of that, a UK exchange became compromised today as well. If I'm not mistaken, roughly $12 million was essentially stolen from this UK exchange by Lazarus Group, the North Korean hackers. So a lot of things have happened today that adds in on the essentially market, putting pressure on the market space to go down, with essentially two pools controlling 51% of Bitcoin's network, which comes to the question of, is it really decentralized when it comes to Bitcoin? And then essentially the Koreans essentially lending and borrowing services completely come to a halt. Also, the UK exchange that became compromised today as well. Nothing's good happening so far. Now, putting all that to one side, because these are just minor bumps onto a bigger picture that we're heading towards, which is just completely bullish moving forward. In other words, two key Republican senators. Key Republican senators expect essentially Democratic support for U.S. crypto market structure bills. While the U.S. Congress remains in essentially recess until September, one of the senators leading essentially the charge behind legislations to establish a digital asset market structure said he expects baptism support. So, key Republicans right now, senators, are coming out and they expect Democrats to back them on bringing crypto legislations inside the United States, as they should do, because if they do reject it, we know what's going to be happening. Like the first time around, when essentially people voted against the Genius Act, and then Trump had a discussion with the people that rejected it, and straight after the votes were overturned. So, speaking from essentially Wyoming Blockchain Symposium in Jackson Hole, essentially today, the Senate Banking Committee Chair, Tim Scott, said he expected at least some Democrats to join with Republicans to move forward on the Clarity Act, which is going to be around September 30th. The act following the passage of the Guidance of Empowering Nations Innovations for U.S. stablecoins, like the Genius Act that was recently passed. The South Carolina senator said that he had already been making efforts to reach out to Democrats outside of the banking committee to provide cover to vote for the bill. So already Republicans are trying to get Democrats involved. So when voting comes up essentially around September, we get the approval we need fast. In other words, no going back and forward, having a Trump discussion and then coming to an actual vote. So we had 18 Democrats vote for the Genius Act, Scott said. I believe we'll have between 12 and 18 Democrats at least open to voting for a market structure, a far more complicated piece of legislation, and the forces against it is a real force to overcome. The Clarity Act is going to give so much credibility towards the crypto space, and it's going to make it very clear on which agency, which government agency is in control of what sector of the crypto space. So the CFTC will have a better idea of what they're going to be exactly doing inside the crypto space, and so will the SEC. And you can say even other departments will have a much more clearer idea. Also, institutions will have a much more open mind and know where the gray areas are and the gray areas aren't. And so will the banks. The Clarity Act is going to bring, as in essentially in the title, so much clarity towards the crypto space. Essentially, before the House passed the Clarity Act on July 17th, Scott said the Banking Committee planned to pass its version of digital asset market structure before the end of September. A draft version of the Senate bill released in July and tentatively titled the Responsible Financial Innovation Act builds on the Clarity Act, according to Republican leadership, but may be different from the House legislation. Republicans hold a 3-seat majority in the Senate, making it likely they will need some Democrats to pass the legislation for crypto market structures. In addition to Scott's remarks from Wyoming, Senator Elizabeth Warren, ranking member of the Banking Committee, commented on the Clarity Act during the congressional recess. She said, "We need crypto regulations," said Warren in August 10th in an interview, "but we don't need regulations written by the crypto industry. We need regulations that limits the corruption and the ability of elected officials to trade in it. That also limits the ability to blow up the economy with crypto." Senator Elizabeth Warren is the definition of a moron. She's saying that the crypto space shouldn't have an input on crypto regulations. Name me one person as a senator who understands the foundation of what cryptocurrencies are, of what Web3 is, of what essentially blockchain and AI is together, of what essentially gaming is, what finance is inside the crypto sector. There's not a single person right now as a senator that understands fully of what a cryptocurrency is. But yet she wants these morons to decide the regulations for people who know and understand and work in the sector. This is why I say Senator Elizabeth Warren is a definition of a moron, and she should honestly just retire at this point. I don't know who keeps on voting for her to rank higher in the seats. Honestly. because that's the most stupidest thing she could have possibly set the date. We should decide what the crypto space can do. You don't even know what Bitcoin is, never mind what the rest of the crypto space is. So why do you get to decide people's futures when you don't even know what it is? Honestly, the definition of a moron is Senator Elizabeth Warren. More than 70 Democrats in the House of Representatives sided with Republicans to pass the Clarity Act. Just to read that again, more than 70 Democrats in the House Representatives sided with the Republicans to pass the Clarity Act. So you can see that people that are behind Senator Elizabeth Warren don't even stand with her because they know she spews moronic opinions as well. So the bill that's going to be essentially passed, the second time of round of voting essentially for the Clarity Act, is going to be round about September times. By the end of the month of September, we should have the Clarity Act, which honestly is going to bring so much clarity towards the crypto space. It's going to be very beneficial for a lot of cryptocurrencies moving forward. Not overnight, but moving forward, it's going to bring so much essentially clarity towards XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, Solana, AVAX, Cardano, so Ethereum. The list just goes on. Now, one thing that's interesting that's also happened is Wyoming. So I've talked about this before regarding essentially stable coins, will become novelty items. And what I mean by that is there's too many. We don't need every state to come out with their own version of a stable coin. We don't need every bank in the world to come out with a stable coin. We don't need every institution to create their own stable coin because then they'll just become novelty items. The whole point is that we're all on the same system. Not that there's essentially 500 versions of a stablecoin, because who's going to be using all of that? So I understand the idea that Wyoming wants to be more involved inside the crypto space. I fully understand that. And I think more American states and mayors and senators and governors should embrace cryptocurrencies. But the idea of every state maybe creating their own stablecoins is honestly just going to become novelty items at this point. Wyoming has launched essentially the Frontier Stable Token, FRNT, the first stablecoin issued by the US state. Reported essentially that came out today is live right now on 7 major blockchains, including Ethereum, Solana, AVAX, ARB, Optimism, Polygon, and Base. The initiative enables dollars to move via crypto rails, offering instant, low-cost payment globally. Wyoming's move essentially is a strict push to accelerate crypto adoption after years of U.S. regulatory hostility. Wyoming's governor, essentially Mark Gordon, emphasized the state's leadership in digital asset regulations, stating for years Wyoming has been the leading state on blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and digital asset regulations, passing over essentially 45 pieces of legislation since 2016. FRNT is essentially a fully backed, legal compliant digital dollar. The state keeps a firm grip on smart contracts, which guarantees transparency and oversight. Plus, with Layer 0, there is seamless cross-chain interoperability. FRNT helps families in countries facing high inflation, like those in South America, allowing them to safeguard their money in stable dollars formats. In the meantime, Asian retailers can benefit from the ease of essentially the FRNT payments, eliminating the need for essentially to wait for banks. This initiative token reduces the costs associated with cross-border transactions and promotes financial inclusion for everyone involved. Apollo, executive director of Wyoming's Stable Token Commission, highlighted that the FRNT is essentially a live, multi-chain digital asset built for essentially real-world use case. It provides a blueprint for how states and governments can responsibly implement blockchain with transparency, legal safeguards, and broad utility from day one. However, the rise essentially of FRNT and other stablecoins may challenge conventional banks. A Morningstar report warns that widespread stablecoin adoption could trigger deposit flights, threatening essentially banks' ability to fund loans. Right now, stablecoins account for just 1.5% of all US deposits, but they are growing rapidly fast. People like using them essentially because they offer rewards and are easy to use and work well with decentralized financial platforms. FRNT essentially in Wyoming sets a new example for state-backed digital money, showing dollars can move safely across multiple blockchains. It also pushes traditional banks to adapt while essentially making it easier for people around the world to access the US dollars. Honestly, I love the idea of any American state coming forward and essentially embracing cryptocurrencies, embracing stablecoins. But the idea of every American state is going to come forward and create their own stablecoin, and every bank in America is going to create their own stablecoin, and every institution in America is going to create their own stablecoin, it's just ludicrous at that point. They should essentially, as Hong Kong put it best, honestly, out of every country out there, Hong Kong put it best. Hong Kong said, we don't need 25 versions of a US dollar stablecoin. We need 2 or 3 max that the world could use. Because beyond 2 to 3 stablecoins is just going to create confusion for everyone. And that every bank, every institution, everyone out there needs to hold different stablecoins for different purposes. Because it's just moronic at that point. It's completely stupid. So I love the idea that they're embracing essentially blockchain, they're embracing cryptocurrencies, they're embracing stablecoins. But the idea of every American state might be coming out and every bank and every institution creating their stablecoins is just stupid at that point. Because they're going to struggle when it comes to international payments. And I know that Wyoming is saying this is great for international payments, but it's only great if the other side accepts your stablecoin. And it's going to get very confusing when there's like 500 versions of a stablecoin. Now, the good thing is the rest of the American states are not doing that from now. Now, crypto bull market is what we're going to talk about. And to be fairly honest, it's just going to be the retail section that might be holding those stablecoins, because institutions will be either holding essentially RLUSD or USDT or USDC. No institution is going to go out of their way of holding 50 American state stablecoins. So the people that might be holding those stablecoins is just going to be the retail section within those states, which is just stupid at that point. They would rather be better off holding RLUSD, USDT, USDC, rather than holding their own state stablecoin, which makes no sense, which also could be manipulated by those state governors. Now, crypto bull market is what we're going to talk about next. I know for a fact that some of you are still waiting, essentially. I can see Johnny's comment right now inside the comment section. So Johnny has put, essentially, actually, let's go inside the comment section first before we go through the next news. Let's see where we're at inside the comment section. We were at here, I think. Let's see. Okay, hope you all had a great day. Let's go, Mike. Good evening, all. No ding dong. No, let's go, CZ. Don't be a ding dong, yo. Hello, Miles and CMF. Covetous, good to see you. How you doing? Let's go. Let's see. All right, share the live. Let's go, Scott. Let's go, family. Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Hi, Miles and CMF. Good to see you all, Golden Dragon. How you doing? Please like. Miles is the GOAT. Let's go, Golden Dragon. Thank you so much for that. Yes, CMF members, if you haven't already liked and retweeted this slide, please like and retweet if you watch us on X right now. USDT going to strength. Is what Kali said. Okay. Orphan says, World Economic Forum select Larry Fink and one person from the pharmaceutical company. What do you think of the outcome is going to be? So, Larry Fink, regarding joining the World Economic Forum as a board member, essentially, which is what I revealed on Friday's live show. Larry Fink joining the World Economic Forum. He's positioned himself on a very comfortable seat, you could pretty much say, regarding Larry Fink. And regarding the pharmaceutical company that's also, joining the World Economic Forum as well, well, you can pretty much tell what's going to be in play. They did say there is another world disaster maybe on the way in the coming years. Essentially, it could be a internet blackout, it could be electricity blackout, or it could be a disease blackout as well, by the looks of it. So, whenever you have Larry Fink involved in any matter, it's never good news, unless he's funding your company. USDT going to strength. Regarding USDT, they actually hired Bo Hemmings, essentially ex-executive from the Trump administration for cryptocurrencies. It's good play for Tether and USDT. Is that going to help Tether and USDT be able to enter the US market space? Probably not. And they shouldn't do, because they don't fall short. They don't show transparency. They're not headquartered in the US, but they're the #1 biggest US, essentially, digital dollars. Everything about Tether is just wrong. If they move their headquarters to the US and then show full transparency every month, then by all means, Tether should be accepted inside the United States as a digital dollars. But as long as Tether doesn't want to put their headquarters in the US, doesn't want to show transparency to the US every month, and doesn't want to do the same thing in the EU, then they shouldn't be allowed to operate, in my point of view. Not financial advice at all. It's just a word of warning, because Tether has paid a fine once for about $40 million for lying about their reserves in a New York court. Internal error every time I post Miles. I don't know why that's happening. I'll be honest. Hi Miles, why XRP going down and no sign of bull run? Johnny, good to see you. How you doing? It's the entire market. It's not just XRP, but because Bitcoin's going through some difficulties, and unfortunately, we still follow its footsteps. Not that time though. Ian. Let's go, Ian. How's your trip going, brother? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Lena, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What date do you think bull run? What date do you think can be bull run? Well, the Clarity Act is around September times, and we could possibly get a rate cut. Maybe we get a rate cut. If the Clarity Act passes through, it's a positive note on the crypto space. It brings clarity moving forward, which is brilliant. And the market should react in a positive way going forward. But yet again, we're going to be having turbulence in that sense. On the other aspect, essentially, also that the market is going through the turbulence of Bitcoin maybe being controlled by two pools right now. Now, Miles, we have waited. Hello, Woodhouse, good to see you. So how you doing? Miles, we have waited nearly 4 years for this bull run to go to the level we have been waiting for. Tell me about it. Really parabolic level. Where can we create where can we create generational wealth? On XRP, to be fairly honest, not financial advice at all. They are handing out free XRP. Where? At this price, yes. Not about money for me. It's a chance to get safe from the trap of the devil. Let's go, Johnny. A big disaster. What they're going to this time, shortage of food and water, probably is a possibility. I feel all this is like a dream and we're going to wake up to reality. None of this is a dream, and this is the reality of what's actually happening around us. Don't get essentially sidetracked of the bigger picture. As I said previously, my father, as I said, always tells me that don't look at the tip of your nose, look further, and you get the bigger image. And honestly, if you look further, you can see the legislations, the institutions, the banks, the licenses. There's so much that's happening behind the scenes that it's all extremely bullish. But the market can't just be, on essentially rocket fuel, because as I said, everybody would just essentially put 250x leverage on everything to go up. There has to be turbulence along the way because that's how the house wins. Otherwise, it's essentially crypto exchanges are just going to become ATM machines for everybody that keeps on paying out because everybody keeps on putting 250x leverages, because we know that the Clarity Act, essentially the Genius Act and the Anti-CBDC Act and the banks and legislations and everything else that's coming with it, it's all positive going forward. But there has to be turbulence. The market just can't sidetrack on the one way, essentially rocket fueling up. Honestly, everybody would just put 250x leverage on everything. And then the crypto exchanges like Binance and Coinbase and Gemini and essentially Kraken will just become ATM machines that will just keep on paying out to people. That can't happen. The house has to win along the way. So don't get sidetracked by some minor bumps and turbulences. Look at what essentially XRP's price was before compared to what it is now. We're not on a drastic downtrend in any sort of way at all. A drastic downtrend for some people might be essentially what XRP if it goes back to 30 cents or 40 cents. That might be a drastic drop. But again, that could also be a blessing in disguise because you know, again, what's going to be happening. So all in all, don't be afraid. We're not in a dream. This is the reality. This is happening. Just needs a little bit more time. You've come so far. Don't get sidetracked now. As you know, I'm a centrist. According to the issue, I can be found on either side of the issue. Senator Warren is self-serving. Why not teach people how to prepare financially for the future and help them instead of keeping essentially the inform that security situation? Think about it. Registered Democrat and disagree with Warren. Facts. Let's go, Scott. I agree. Sorry about the errors. No problem, Scott. Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Hi, Miles and CMF. Peg, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Will XRP go to 50 cents? Will XRP go to 50 cents? It would be a dream come true for a lot of people to buy it at 50 cents. I'll be very honest with you. Now, regarding essentially the crypto bull run situation that we're going to be in a new report that's came out today. So, crypto bull market could run until 2027. A Bernstein prediction has come out right now. So this isn't some random, essentially, crypto influencer analysis out there. This is Bernstein coming out with a report. In a new report from Bernstein, they said that the crypto bull cycle may extend into 2027, driven by supportive US policies and accelerating institutional involvements. Bernstein expects Bitcoin to remain the market primary engine in the near term, projecting that the flagship token could hit between $150,000 to $200,000 within the next year. Once BTC tops out, analysts believe Ethereum, Solana, XRP, DeFi tokens will take the lead in fueling the next phase of the growth. Institutional demand continues to be the major catalyst. Spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US have fueled billions into the market this year, and trading platforms essentially are seeing record activity right now. Bernstein raised its price targets for the crypto-linked companies, setting $510 for Coinbase, $160 for Robinhood, and $230 for essentially Circle, citing July's sharp surge in volumes and expanding essentially product offerings. Robinhood's crypto trading volume more than doubled last month, hitting $16.8 billion, while Coinbase crossed $100 billion in July in transactions, lifting revenue essentially estimates by 44% compared to prior quarters. Despite near-term volatility triggered by essentially macroeconomic data such as the US PPI reports, the CPI reports, geopolitical tensions, and all the other minor essentially speed bumps we're going through, Bernstein maintains that the structural essentially outlook is bullish still, with digital assets poised to remain an upward trajectory through 2027. So, according to Bernstein, moving forward, the market's just going to go higher and higher and higher. Sure, we'll have speed bumps along the way with more CPI data reports and PPI data reports and war scenarios and geopolitical tensions going up, because that's something that always happens in this world. But according to Bernstein's reports, that will happen, but alongside that's happening is still going to be a massive trajectory going essentially further and further and further, higher and higher, inside the crypto space as essentially we continue forward, even from essentially this year to 2026 to 2027, just going higher and higher. The market will essentially get to certain levels, a little bit of turbulence will happen, bring the market a little bit down, and then the market will essentially go back up again. A little bit of turbulence on a PPI data report, the market will come down again. Essentially, the market will go back up again a little bit, and then we'll have no rate cuts, the market will come down a little bit. That's just how the game is played. But all you have to look at is where your assets were and where are they sitting at now? Because your assets were sitting here and now they're sitting in here and they went a little bit down. And some people might be panicking or fearing for that sense. Why? You brought your assets here, now they're sitting here. Big difference. If it comes a little bit down, it's okay. Moving forward, you're still good to go. Now, so don't even fear for a second. Even Bernstein is saying it as well. This isn't essentially, as I said, a random crypto influencer or some essentially analyst inside the crypto space. This is Bernstein with their reports, telling everybody the major outlook, the structural outlook going forward, it's still bullish all the way into 2027. Now, Skybridge is what we're going to talk about next. So some people might think, as I said, the crypto space might be, over in some sort of a way, but according to institutions, not even by, essentially at all, let's just put it that way. Skybridge Capital to tokenize $300 million in hedge funds on AVAX. Skybridge Capital, an investment firm founded essentially by Anthony, plans to tokenize $300 million worth of assets on AVAX. Skybridge Capital announced the project essentially on August, today, noting that the company is looking to tokenize $300 million in two funds on the AVAX blockchain. The initiative essentially is a collaboration between Skybridge Capital and Tokeny, an enterprise essentially great tokenization platform recently acquired by $3.5 trillion financial services essentially firm Apex Group Limited. Skybridge Capital joins a host of traditional finance firms and institutions that are tapping into tokenization trend. With real-world assets such as treasury bills, stocks, commodities, and private credits coming on-chain to leverage benefits of blockchain trading, and asset managers like BlackRock, Fidelity, and others have taken essentially advantage. Many real-world assets essentially are on-chain via Ethereum, Solana, Stellar, AVAX, ARB, XRP, and among others, allowing investors access to real-world assets much like crypto natives do with essentially Bitcoin and other digital assets. Anthony Skybridge is looking to join this growing group of tokenization. Tokenizing our funds on AVAX, supported by technology and operational infrastructure of Tokeny and Apex Group, represents a significant step forward in modernizing essentially the alternative investments landscape. Skybridge Capital founder and chief executive officer, essentially Anthony, said the two tokenized funds to be deployed on AVAX essentially will account for approximately 10% of Skybridge's capital assets under management. One is the Digital Macro essentially Master Fund Ltd, and the other is the Legion Strategies Ltd. Both funds will leverage essentially the ERC 3643 standard and tap into Apax's essentially Group Digital 3.0 platform. This milestone shows how Apax Group and Tokeny essentially are breaking down the operational technological barriers that have historically slowed institutional tokenization. Skybridge's tokenization on AVAX proves that the right technology, trusted operators, and regulatory clarity, tokenization at scale is not just possible, it's happening right now. And essentially said Daniel, that's the global head of digital assets at Apex Group and the co-founder of Tokeny. Real-world assets on-chain deployed on AVAX's network include the essentially BlackRock USD Institutional Liquid Fund, or BUILD, and the Franklin on-chain US Government Money Fund, Benji in other words. According to essentially real-world assets.xyz, the total value of real-world assets on AVAX currently stands at around $187.9 million. Well done to AVAX. It has always been a very underrated chain, to be fairly honest, but I've always talked positive about AVAX in that sense. Brilliant to see that happening on AVAX. To me, AVAX is a much more better choice than Solana is for tokenization by a mile, to be fairly honest. Putting that to one side, RWA essentially has, people on the crypto space have been posting about rwa.xyz, which is a website that you can go and check out essentially the analytics of, which token is ranking where when it comes to the amount of tokenization and money that's flowing into it. I've seen certain influencers in the past and current keep on posting bad information inside the crypto space, where they'll post and say XRP is not even on the list of tokenizations according to real world assets .xyz essentially, and so on. Yes, it is. XRP is ranked 9th on that list, and technically in the top 30 days essentially is ranked 2nd. So for all the people that are essentially posting false information regarding XRP, saying it doesn't list on RWA XYZ, yes it does. In general, it's sitting at 9th, and in total, in terms of 30 days, is ranking at 2nd on that list. Just want to put that one out there as well. Now, Brazil is what we're going to talk about next. So moving off essentially AVAX, brilliant essentially on the AVAX chain, to Brazil. Before we talk about Brazil, let's go into the comment section first. Let's see where we're at. As I said previously, this is live like always, which means if you do have any questions or comments, put it down in the comment section. More than happy to read them out and give you a perspective. So let's see where we were at. We were at here. China looking like a safe haven where the UK is going. Yeah. I want freedom from the matrix, doesn't everybody? UK is a pensioner of dementia. It's finished. I want peace. Can XRP buy me this in question? Yes, as long as you keep your head down, yes. Hi, Miles and CMF family. I am happy to see you, Miles. Sorry I'm late. Let's go with the facts news. Let's go, Carl. Good to see you as well. The world is falling apart. Where is safety? Well, okay. 3 years ago, on TikTok Lives, when I used to do TikTok Lives, 3 years ago, I told everybody that the idea that essentially, they're opening their borders right now, and people said it's because of voting. So they open their doors. There's many reasons why, countries are opening their doors to immigration right now. And I said that they're going to do that 3 years ago. I said they're going to do that. And to the point where crime starts to increase, not just, essentially in certain countries, but essentially in the West in general, that crime is going to increase, which it has. And that they will use that factor to make everybody, the citizen of that country, to beg, literally to beg for safety. And then the government will turn around and essentially say, no problem, you want safety, we can introduce essentially, facial recognition cameras to find criminals faster. We can do this and that and this and that, and essentially bring that control in. I said this 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I said this. 2 years ago, I said this as well, where countries are going to be opening their borders. A lot of people are going to be pouring in, and they're going to make the citizens of that country beg for safety, which Then the governments will introduce censorship, and they will introduce facial recognitions, they will introduce digital IDs, and so on. And I said they're going to make you want that type of life. And then you fast forward to now, where you see certain influencers telling people exactly what I said 2-3 years ago, essentially. But it's all part of the plan. And the same idea that 3 years ago I told everyone, and again, I'm not trying to say any of this to brag about it at all, but it's just to remind everybody once again of what's happening, just in case some people might have lost track. 3 years ago, I also said essentially that actually, we'll put it aside. Now, hi, Miles, CMF family. I'm happy to see you, Mouse. Sorry, okay, we're here. Also, why do you think ETFs? What year will CoinMove launch? Great question. What year is CoinMove going to launch? This, I hope, this year. If not, next year. Why do you think ETFs got extended? Good question. The reason why ETFs essentially got extended, in my opinion, is because the SEC is coming out with this, essentially template of what they're essentially trying to keep. Essentially the SEC is trying to come up with this crypto project, they're calling it, essentially, where they're going to come up with certain rules for the crypto space in general to bring innovation. So my opinion for the extension of all the ETFs is that the SEC is trying to work out their framework, their foundation, before they move forward. And also because we still don't have the Clarity Act, which could help a lot because it tells the SEC what they're required to do and what the CFTC is required to do. There are a YouTuber essentially who said if there's a XRP ETF, then it will become a security. Is it true? No. Is Bitcoin a security? Bitcoin has an ETF. Is Ethereum a security? It has an ETF as well. So the idea of only if XRP gets an ETF, it becomes a security is absolutely ludicrous and stupid to say in the first place. Not towards you, in any sort of way, but whoever this YouTuber is telling people essentially, if XRP gets an ETF, whoever this YouTuber is, if XRP is getting an ETF, then it becomes a security is absolutely stupid. And that means Bitcoin is a security, and so is Ethereum, and so is anything else that gets an ETF. But Bitcoin isn't, neither is Ethereum, and neither is XRP. I said it only becomes a security essentially if it's launched as a company. So essentially if it's a stock, which it isn't in that sense. I purchased a few XRP a few minutes ago at $2.80. Let's go, Scott. Internal error again, Miles. Ian, I can see your comments. So even though when you type something in and you press enter, it might say on your screen internal error, but on my screen I can see your comments. So don't worry, just type in whatever you want to type in. I said that to my granddad, apart from what I said, is they will ruin the country, then fix it with control. Yes, it's the oldest method ever, to essentially introduce a problem and then introduce essentially themselves, introducing the resolution of that problem, which they create in the first place. It's a trick that will always work because people are forgetful, as I said previously. The reason why the world is the way it is because, essentially, and the reason why history will always repeat itself is because people are forgetful. If only people essentially remembered that essentially they were, manipulated on this particular topic, then 10 years later, they try to do the exact same method. And people realize, well, 10 years ago, we got manipulated by this certain topic. So I'm smart enough not to fall for it again. If only people were smart enough not to fall for it again. Unfortunately, people aren't. And the majority aren't, to be fairly honest. The minority is, the majority is, and that's why the world is the way it is. Remember you saying it? Let's go, Pablo. No mistakes, Miles, 1,000,000,000% sure. Yep. I read this morning, essentially, that Klaus Schwab's found no guilty. The allegations include unauthorized spending by both him and his wife, harassment, and inappropriate treatment of female staff. I'm not surprised that essentially Klaus Schwab's was found not guilty in that sense. He is Klaus Schwab's, which there's not a single judge in their right mind that would essentially say Klaus Schwab's is guilty in any sort of a way. Not surprised on that matter at all. I will book a car and a chauffeur with CoinMove and stablecoins. Is that all right at launch? Sure, why not? Now, Brazil. Brazil, as we talked about beforehand, is about to do a meeting on if Brazil is about to be creating a Bitcoin treasury as a country, which could be a big deal, especially for MicroStrategy. So here it is. Brazil is set to hold its first ever hearing on a Bitcoin street reserve tomorrow, marking a historical step essentially in the nation's approach to digital assets. The discussion will explore whether the country should begin accumulating Bitcoin as a part of its official reserves, similar to how essentially it manages foreign currencies and gold. This move comes essentially as more countries begin to consider Bitcoin or essentially other cryptocurrencies not just as an investment but as a sovereign reserve asset capable of diversifying national balance sheets. While El Salvador essentially famously became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender in 2021, Brazil's exploration essentially of Bitcoin street reserve represents a different, more cautious path. Rather than focusing on daily transactions, Brazil is examining Bitcoin's potential as a hedge against currency fluctuations and global financial risk. If adopted, essentially, Brazil would become one of the largest economies to formally integrate Bitcoin into its reserve strategies, a move that could influence other emerging markets to follow in suit. Other Latin American countries might follow in suit as well. The hearing signals that the nation states are beginning to stack Bitcoin, treating it as essentially as a serious financial instrument rather than a speculative asset. With a large economy and influential role in Latin America, Brazil's potential entry into Bitcoin reserves could set a precedent for other countries exploring crypto-backed physical strategies. While essentially tomorrow's hearing in Brazil will not immediately result in essentially in the adoption of Bitcoin happening overnight, it could be the first step towards Bitcoin playing a role in Brazil's official financial policy, and by extension, a milestone for Bitcoin's global legitimacy. You know for a fact that essentially Michael Saylor is not going to be sleeping essentially tonight or tomorrow, just to see what the verdict is from Brazil. Are they going to adopt a Bitcoin reserve or not? Because, you know, Michael Saylor couldn't get the US to invest into it. He couldn't get Microsoft to invest in the Bitcoin. He couldn't get Meta to essentially invest in the Bitcoin. He couldn't even get a few countries to invest in Bitcoin. But if Brazil randomly essentially invests in the Bitcoin, it could be what Michael Saylor was looking for. Now, the Federal Reserve is what we're going to talk about next. So, something interesting has come out of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve may allow staff to hold a small crypto holdings. So apparently the Federal Reserve is going to be giving a green light to their staff members to hold a small crypto portfolio, which is quite essentially, you know, incredible, to be fairly honest. The Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision, essentially Michelle Bowman, suggested allowing essentially staff to own minimal cryptocurrency amounts to enhance understanding during the Wyoming blockchain symposium on August 20th, 2025. Bowman's essentially proposal indicates a potential regulatory shift, possibly affecting market sentiments towards major cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others, aiming to attract specialized talent at the Federal Reserve. Michelle Bowman justified the proposal by highlighting the challenges of recruiting skilled examiners, essentially if staff cannot personally own cryptocurrencies. She suggested that allowing the Federal Reserve staff to hold small crypto amounts to foster better familiarity with digital assets. Our approach should consider allowing Federal Reserve staff to hold a de minimis amount of crypto or other types of digital assets so they can have a better understanding of the risk and opportunities associated with these digital assets. And so we can essentially attract and retain the talent necessary to effectively supervise the initiative activities, stated Bowman. This move essentially is seen as an attempt to create a balanced regulation approach, keeping the Federal Reserve competitive in talent acquisitions within the fintech sector. Apparently, the Federal Reserve is going to maybe be hiring crypto-related people as well. So we can have blockchain minds inside the Federal Reserve, and essentially the staff members of the Federal Reserve can also hold small amounts of crypto. This is all, you know, quite interesting from a Federal Reserve that didn't like cryptocurrencies, hated on the idea and said they'll never go into it, and to now fast forwarding where, you know, they're telling the banks it's okay to get involved with cryptocurrencies. They're telling their staff members they can hold small amounts of crypto, and they're saying that we might be hiring crypto-related people inside the Federal Reserve. Immediate implementations could shift towards essentially a more crypto-friendly regulatory environment at the Federal Reserve. The relaxation could position the organization as a more essentially representative to digital asset engagements, potentially influencing broader regulatory attitudes. No specific details or timelines were disclosed essentially for implementing this certain policy, where essentially change is on the way, reflecting an early stage of considerations and discussions. While major crypto figures have yet to publicly respond on the matter, sentiments might echo essentially past reactions to regulatory softening Historically, market participation associates such news with essentially potential bullish sentiments for large cap cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Viewing regulatory openness as positive, Bowman's proposal could lead to a broader adoption essentially of crypto-friendly policies in financial essentially regulations, aligning Federal Reserve practices with emerging digital assets, and might foster positive market sentiments and enhance the institution's monitoring capabilities. So, the Federal Reserve is about to essentially tell its staff members you can essentially hold cryptocurrencies, and we're going to hire crypto-related people so we can have a better understanding. So we might not be getting the rate cuts we wanted from Jerome Powell, but the Trump administration, is making the Federal Reserve a lot more crypto-friendly than it ever was in the past during Biden's administration of circus freaks, to be fairly honest. Honestly, the Federal Reserve has come a long way from hating cryptocurrencies, not understanding cryptocurrencies, to now telling their staff members you can hold small amount of cryptocurrencies, hiring crypto-related people, telling banks it's okay, removing a certain law, telling them it's okay to work with crypto companies. They've come a long way. Now, before we go through the next news, which is regarding essentially tariffs, let's go to the comment section first, and then we're straight into the next news. So let's see where we were at. We were at here. Thoughts on news on XLM, XDC, and ACH. No news on XLM, XDC, and ACH, but they're still brilliant assets. SEI and HOT, they're still good. Hey, Miles, welcome back. D, good to see you as well. How you doing? I'm well, thanks. Miles is the GOAT, crypto GOAT. Let's go, Scott. Thank you for that, brother. Do you think the XRP ETF will get approved by October deadline? It should do, in my opinion. As I said previously, extending an XRP ETF makes no sense whatsoever, but they extended it as a group. It could be on the sense that the SEC still doesn't have the guidelines it need to essentially approve the ETFs. And also the SEC can't, probably in their eyes, approve certain ETFs and not approve others, because they want to do it as a collective group, so there's no competition between them. But we know who the winner is out of all the XRP, out of all the ETFs, is XRP by a mile. You could tell from the essentially filings that have happened. But it should do, yes, 100% it should do. As long as the SEC has their essentially foundation built for what they're going to do next, the guidelines, it should do, yes, 100%. It can happen even before that. Miles, if one owns 10K XRP, would it be a waste to invest in an XRP ETF since they own the actual product? Yes. Well, in my point of view, if you own XRP, the asset itself, if you want to go for XRP ETFs, you can. At the end of the day, it is your money. I personally own essentially, I personally would opt in for one. If you want to opt in for both, it's completely your choice. I personally just opt in for one. Do you think BlackRock will apply for an XRP ETF? No. Maybe. Okay, let me make one thing very clear. Hi, Miles and group. Strawberry Hill, good to see you as well. How you doing? Let me make one thing clear. A lot of people are, essentially on the side of why BlackRock hasn't applied for an XRP ETF. BlackRock likes to control. Everybody knows this. It could be someone with a finance background and someone that doesn't have a finance background. But just observing, you can see that BlackRock loves the idea of control. BlackRock essentially controls Coinbase, you could pretty much say. They control Circle, you could pretty much say. When there was rumors going around that Ripple might buy out Circle, suddenly the news comes out of BlackRock that BlackRock says if Circle goes public, we will buy a certain amount of essentially of their shares. BlackRock loves the idea of control. They have the biggest, essentially, Bitcoin ETF. They essentially are invested heavily into the 5 biggest Bitcoin mining institutions. So they control the majority of the network, you pretty much say, in terms of the public companies that are mining Bitcoin. They control essentially Coinbase. They control essentially, Circle and so on. They love the idea of control. BlackRock can't control Ripple because Ripple is not a public company. It's a private company. So, some people could say I'm way off or I'm on the money on this sense, but Ripple is trying to compete. And they're winning. It might not look like it, but Ripple is winning right now. With the case pretty much gone, you could say, with the SEC, that news that I read out to everyone, with the SEC that might be helping essentially Ripple's footsteps, with Ripple applying for a banking license while still remaining private, Ripple is a threat to banks, to institutions that don't adapt to Ripple's methods. And if BlackRock can't control Ripple's footsteps, if they can't control where Ripple is supposed to go next, they're not going to be heavily interested in it. The only way BlackRock will essentially create an XRP ETF is if they can have some sort of control over it. Or they just have to bend the knee. It's the easiest way to put it. BlackRock has to bend the knee to Ripple. Otherwise, Ripple is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And BlackRock's going to get left out. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's just ridiculous. BlackRock is too big to fail. A lot of companies were too big to fail. All of these banks that we have right now, when later on everybody goes towards cryptocurrency wallets, what's going to happen to the majority of these banks? Even though some of them did get involved in cryptocurrencies, they're still not going to be surviving for the longest time because people will just do wallet-to-wallet transactions. Why would I need a Lloyd's bank account? Why would I need a HSBC bank account? Why would I need a Chase bank account if I could just do wallet-to-wallet transactions later on, when more people adapt to the idea of wallet-to-wallet transactions internationally? Because my wallet won't tell me who you're sending, essentially why you're sending a certain amount of money to someone if it's essentially I'm sending it from a DeFi space. From exchange, then sure, they will ask it. But what I'm trying to say is that Ripple is coming into play to revolutionize everything and to beat the game. And I've said this before, when the SEC, Mr. Gary Gensler, went after essentially Ripple, in my point of view, the SEC was weaponized. The SEC was weaponized to go after Ripple. And my guess would be it was the banks that weaponized Gary Gensler, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and the head of the FDIC and the OCC to form one side to tell the banks not to work with companies like Ripple, and from the other side to go against Ripple, to slow down Ripple's progress so that they can catch up to Ripple. While Ripple was being sued, essentially JP Morgan created their own chain to be able to do transactions, to repeat, or essentially to be able to compete on Ripple's scale. Ripple did something more genius. They went international. They started getting contracts and licensings everywhere around the world in that sense. And you could tell that essentially the SEC was weaponized when you have 42 banking essentially 42 banks standing behind banking association organizations right now, telling the OCC to slow down the progress of giving companies like Ripple or Circle or so on a banking license, because banks are threatened by Ripple, and so are certain institutions, because they can't control its outcomes. They can't control Ripple. And as long as Ripple stays private, then it's showing its strength. It's showing that it doesn't need money, and that essentially Ripple is going to be in charge of Ripple. On the other hand, Circle, who went public, they needed money. Let's just be fairly honest with ourselves. Circle needed money. They didn't mind the idea of being controlled. Coinbase needed money earlier on in the days, so they didn't mind the idea of being controlled. I'm just being fairly honest from what I essentially observe on that matter. Ripple, on the other hand, doesn't want to be controlled. So the only way BlackRock is going to get involved, it's either it's going to be when Ripple essentially goes public, or it's just going to be BlackRock's going to bend the knee to Ripple. Because I'll tell you what, some people might call me crazy, some people might call me whatever. In my point of view, there'll be a day where Ripple will become as essentially more bigger than essentially BlackRock could ever dream of becoming. There'll be a day when essentially Ripple is much more bigger than JP Morgan and much more bigger than BlackRock itself. They can't control Ripple, so it's difficult for them. They have to bend the knee to accept Ripple. Are they going to do that? We'll see as time goes by. And they have massive egos, to be fairly honest. I have an ego. Everybody has an ego. Everybody has an ego on this planet. So imagine BlackRock's ego when you have somebody like Ripple standing up on its own 2 feet. But BlackRock can control Bitcoin's outcome. They can control Ethereum's outcome. They can control Coinbase's outcome. They can control Circle's outcome. They can't control Ripple's outcome. But what they can do is throw hurdles in its path. Just need to share that with everyone, because everybody's always asking the question of, even inside the crypto space, everybody's always asking the question of, where's BlackRock's XRP ETF? BlackRock can't control Ripple. They can't, because it's not public and Ripple's not selling shares. Even though Link2Go is selling shares that didn't even essentially exist, It's not selling shares at all, so they can't control its footsteps. So it's either they bend the knee or Ripple goes public, which I don't want Ripple to go public, to be fairly honest. I don't want Ripple to go public. I want them to stay private because that's where their strength is at, staying private. But if they did go public, then that just means everybody's playing nice with each other. This is the best group online. No offers to sell, want anything, and has actual Q&A sessions. More especially, I love how diverse economically, socially, and ethnically our group is. Let's go start. Facts. When do you think we will be parabolic all season, and do you think there will be a huge dip before that, in your opinion? Dips will always be happening. Huge dip possibility before a massive, essentially, upscale. Parabolic movements could be happening September onwards. This fairly almost, Clarity Act passes in September. And Miles does his best to answer everyone's question. That's true. This is astonishing. I think it's okay. Let's go. When do you think the banking license will get approved for Ripple? Hopefully, essentially this year should be the answer. Can you see XRP reaching $4 before the end of this year? Yes, I do see it happening, but again, it just depends on how things are going to play. Since the fiscal year for the US government begins October 1st, 2025, I see a lot of things happening by September 30th, 2025. What do you think, Miles? I agree. September is supposed to be rate cut month and also the Clarity Act month and the CBDC Act month. Miles, for your information, Ian has been trying to send you posts, but they only come over the live as internal errors. I can see Ian's posts. I don't know why on his side it says internal error. On my side, I can read his posts. Now, moving on from that to S&P. What are the chances of a utility bull run? We're heading towards utility. You could even say we're in a utility bull run. It's just because with the amount of banks and institutions, not just in the US, but worldwide now, so heavily and in open doors and behind closed doors involved in crypto space, you can see that we're moving towards utility. And there's been certain CEOs and CFOs that have come onto Bloomberg Live and said that essentially we're moving towards utility. And one CEO even said, forget about Bitcoin on live news, and he said we're moving towards utility now. So in other words, what are the chances of a utility bull run? High. It's the exact run that we're heading towards. We're heading towards, as I said previously, a regulated institutional run, which is technically a utility run. Now, let's move on to the Ripple news. Actually, you know what? Let's move on to the global financial group news, which is on topic of what we've been discussing right now. Global financial groups urge delay on crypto banking rules. Remember when I said essentially they've tried everything to slow down Ripple's progress, and it hasn't worked whatsoever because Ripple just ended up going international? Major global financial lobbying groups have called on regulatory bodies to pause implementing new crypto banking rules. Now, why essentially has major global financial lobbying groups called on regulatory bodies to pause implementing new crypto banking rules? It's because they're threatened by companies like Ripple. Citing overall essentially strict measures, according to a Bloomberg report that came out today. This appeal could impact the formal crypto banking policies set for 2026, possibly reshaping banks' digital asset strategies and affecting stability in financial markets. In a recent initiative, major global financial lobby groups have reached out to the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. They expressed concerns about the potential impact of upcoming regulations on the banking sector of cryptocurrencies. Why are they so concerned about cryptocurrencies and banking coming together? Because banks will slowly become obsolete. People will take their monies out of the bank and put it into cryptocurrencies, put it into stable coins and so on, and just use wallet-to-wallet transfers, which will make the banks go, the simplest way to put it. In a recent initiative, major global financial lobbyists, essentially from the Basel Committee, the new rules are stated to be too strict and not reflective of real-world digital asset applications. The lobbying groups call for a thorough review and recalibration of essentially these standards before they plan adoption in 2026. According to Eric, essentially chair of the BCBS and governor of Sovereign and Risk Bank, by promoting global cooperation and pursuing a forward-looking approach to mitigating emerging risk and vulnerabilities affecting the global banking system, the committee's 2025 to 2026 work programs essentially seek to further strengthen the regulation, the supervision, and practices of banks worldwide, promoting global financial stability and support long-term economic growth. Responses from the official channels indicate continued dialogue. According to Eric, the essentially chair of the BCBS, the ongoing communication is aimed to understand emerging risk and vulnerabilities, while Tiff, essentially the chair of the GHOS and the governor of Bank of Canada, reaffirms the committee's dedication to globally consistent essentially standards. No immediate delays or changes have been affirmed by the Basel Committee, and dialogues and essential stakeholders are open. Research teams suggest future regulatory adjustments could stabilize cryptocurrency markets, offering better integration with traditional financial systems. These developments could enhance institutional adoption, provided essentially that the evolving technologies like essentially DLT, distributed ledger technology, are duly essentially considered in the regulatory frameworks. As you can see, certain banks aren't happy that fintech banks like Ripple are getting a banking license, because if Ripple gets a banking license, I guarantee you, not financial advice in any sort of way, just my own personal preference, entertainment purposes only. In my point of view, Ripple gets a banking license moving forward. They have all the international licensings they need. They have all the partnerships they need. They even have essentially BNY Mellon custodying essentially the RLUSD, which gives them extreme credibility inside the banking sector. But Ripple gets a banking license, starts offering similar to a bank account, but with essentially, as you could say, through wallets, let's just say. People will start moving away from their traditional banks to a Ripple bank, because they'll see it as, well, a Ripple bank won't ask me 21 questions if I want to use my own money. A Ripple bank won't be essentially, stopping me from making certain purchases. But my own bank does. When I want cash from my own bank, it will ask me 21 questions. If I want to send a huge amount of money to someone, it will ask 21 questions. If I want to make a big purchase, they could even reject me with my own money. But a Ripple bank doesn't do that. You could pretty much say. Also adds credibility to XRP. A lot more people will be moving on to the XRP ledger, creating essentially a wallet on the XRP ledger as well. Now, Deutsche Bank disputes right now essentially Yellen's Fed rate suggestion. So, Deutsche Bank, essentially a strategist Matthew, challenges the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's call for 150 to 175 basis point rate cut, stating that the model does not support such a reduction. So there's a debate going on over right now with essentially Deutsche Bank and Janet Yellen on the idea that a rate cut should be somewhere around 150 to 175, which could be seen as quite high and could cause, a very high market disruption, which in a sense could be positive for the crypto space by blasting through it. So the debate over interest rates essentially reflects ongoing uncertainties of fiscal policies influencing bond markets and potentially affecting cryptocurrency market sentiments and volatility. Deutsche Bank, the US interest rate strategy team, led by Matthew, challenges a claim attributed to Janet Yellen regarding 150 to 175 basis points reduction in the US in terms of the federal fund rate. They argue that the proposed cut lacks essentially support from existing financial models and emphasize the Fed's rule, suggesting a narrow rate adjustment. Former Fed economist Riskin also and his team essentially propose a more modest 25 basis point reduction, aligning with the current financial guidelines. The Deutsche Bank team's analysis reveals disparities in Janet Yellen's statements, leading to renowned discussions on interest rate policies in that sense. Their reports caution against significant rate cuts without substantial evidence and potentially affecting investor confidence and the bond market essentially responses. Janet Yellen's remarks have stirred reactions in financial circles. But official essentially transcripts have not confirmed her direct approach to the quoted model-based rate reductions. Market analysts appear cautious with minor adjustments in financial projections, reflecting the ongoing debate's influence on future policy essentially expectations. We know that the progress rarely moves in a straight line, but I still believe that there is a path to continue reducing essentially inflation while maintaining a very healthy labor market, Janet Yellen says. The Secretary of the Treasury, US Treasury, in a previous essentially rate debates, such as during the 2015 to 2019 normalization cycle, similar disagreements led to short-term crypto market volatilities, showing how central bank speeches can sway investor emotions without essentially necessary indications of long-term impacts. Market anticipants hinge on the essential regulatory frameworks and the Fed's policy clarity. Historical precedents also demonstrate short-lived essentially impacts unless bolstered by robust economic indicators, and such factors contribute to the market, to the current market volatility and the broader crypto market sentiments amidst global monetary positionings and debates. So Janet Yellen saying 150 basis points to 175 basis points. If we get such a rate cut like that, it could cause a massive ripple effect inside the market space. Crypto market space should be reacting in a huge positive way in that sense, unless it gets heavily manipulated at that moment in time. 25 basis points makes a lot more sense than 175 basis points, to be fairly honest. So I agree with essentially with Deutsche Bank, but any rate cut at this point would be brilliant, to be fairly honest. Any rate cuts. Now, what we're going to do is talk about Ripple now. So we're going to move on to the Ripple segment of the live. There's a bit of Ripple news to go through on tonight's live. Before we go through that, let's go inside the comment section. First, let's see where we're at, and then we'll go straight into the Ripple news back to back. Because there's more than one Ripple news. Let's see where we're at inside the comment section. We were at here. And Miles is best to answer most questions. Facts. There's a solution I think is okay. When do you think bank license is okay? Can you see? Okay, we read that already. Where we were at? We were at. Okay. What is the chance of utility? Well, okay, we read that as well. Okay, we're here. Do you think if Ripple gets the license to become a bank, then they will go IPO and potentially get listed on Wall Street? It's a possibility, yes. If Ripple is able to get its banking license and a Fed master account, then going IPO after that is perfectly fine, to be fairly honest. Because they did everything they need to do, and then going IPO after that, it's okay. Because they accomplished everything on their list. As I said, if they go IPO, good. If they don't go IPO, it's still good. Can you please tell us where could be the best place to create an XRP ledger wallet? Obviously, no financial advice. An XRP wallet, you can do it through Xamon, essentially, to be fairly honest. It's on the chain as well. Do you see Retis ever being tokenized? I don't know. I'll be honest. I do believe when Ripple gets its bank license, it will be the end of fiat money. I agree 100%. On that topic of banks and Ripple, banks just got permission to embrace stablecoins, a full-on permission. So here is why, essentially, it's a big win for Ripple. The Office of the Essential Currency, the OCC, said the move is designed to modernize payments and give local institutions access to tools once essentially reserved for larger financial players. Now, the 42 banks behind the banking associations are telling the OCC to slow down their progress on giving Ripple a license and Circle a license and so on. But according to the OCC themselves, they're not slowing down whatsoever. The OCC, essentially, Jonathan V. Good, emphasized that stablecoins could help banks deliver faster, cheaper, and more reliable payment options to their customers. By removing the prior requirements for banks to seek formal approval before working with crypto firms, the OCC has lowered its barriers and signaled that digital assets are becoming a part of the mainstream finance now. The update builds on the regulatory earlier guidance, which allowed federally chartered banks to hold crypto essentially reserves, provide custody, and verify transactions on blockchain networks. Officials stressed, however, that the risk essentially management systems remain critical as the industry evolves. The timing coincides with the Treasury Department ongoing consultation process under the Genius Act, which aims to define a nationwide framework for stablecoins. For Ripple, this shift could come at essentially not. For Ripple, this couldn't come at a better time, to be fairly honest. The Ripple, essentially, the company has been positioning itself, essentially, its RLUSD stablecoin for the use of traditional finance and recently applied for the US banking license. With the committee bank essentially now permitted to hold stablecoin reserves, Ripple can forge partnerships even before securing a full national bank approval. Just to repeat that one more time, with the essentially community of banks now permitted to hold stablecoin reserves, Ripple can forge partnerships with banks right now in the US, even before securing a full national bank approval. Ripple has also strengthened its ecosystem through acquisitions. Its $200 million purchase of Rail, a Canadian platform responsible for processing a significant share of global B2B stablecoin transactions, has expanded essentially RLUSD's role in essentially cross-border settlements and treasury solutions. Industry watchers describe this streak essentially play. One analyst compared Ripple's actions to laying in the pipes for new financial system, highlighting how the combination of regulatory clarity and institutional trust could give RLUSD the competitive edge. RLUSD gains market momentum. Confidence in Ripple stablecoin has essentially been on the rise since the conclusion of its legal battles over essentially XRP. RLUSD supply has already surpassed $500 million, with more than $150 million issued in recent months. Its growth rate essentially has outpaced that of several older essentially rivals, underscoring accelerating adoption right now for RLUSD. Institutional appetite has also been boosted by the Genius Act that's actually passed recently as well, which introduced much more clearer guardrails for stablecoin issuers backed by cash and short-term US treasuries and supported by Ripple's trust license in New York. RLUSD is increasingly seeing a reliable option for enterprise looking to integrate essentially digital dollars into their operations. So right now, the OCC giving the full-on green light today to banks gives Ripple that edge that even before they get their license, they can start making their partnerships happen with the banking world in the United States, the ones that do want to work with Ripple, which would be the smarter option, that they can get those partnerships on essentially rolling before even Ripple gets their banking license, which would give Ripple a much more bigger edge because the moment they get their license, they already have the partnerships they need inside the banking sector. Ripple's RLUSD makes history with bullish exchange. So you might be thinking to yourself, how far has Ripple integrated themselves as RLUSD being taken seriously or XRP being taken seriously? Well, Ripple's RLUSD today made history with bullish exchange $1.15 billion IPO. So where's the relevance? Bullish exchange, $1.15 billion IPO. What's the relevance to Ripple, XRP, RLUSD? In what essentially represents a historical step for the use of stablecoins in an IPO in the United States, the digital asset platform Bullish has announced that it has arranged to receive $1.15 billion of proceeds from its recently completed initial public offering in stablecoins, including RLUSD. They're going public, and essentially the initial, money raising was through RLUSD. Ripple essentially reacted to this milestone in an X post, noting that a portion of Bullish's IPO proceeds was settled in RLUSD stablecoin, minted on the XRP ledger. Aside from essentially XRP ledger, Ripple stablecoin RLUSD is also available on Ethereum's blockchain as well. Just want to put it out there because a lot of people inside the X community space, inside the crypto space, put out tweets. Nobody's using XRP, essentially nobody's using RLUSD on the XRP ledger. They're using it on the Ethereum chain only. No, they're not, because according to recent news, they're actually using RLUSD on the XRP ledger for institutions. Congrats to Bullish on the successful IPO. A portion of IPO proceeds was settled in RLUSD, minted on the XRP ledger. This is the first public listing to bring the settlement process on-chain and sets a precedent for how stablecoins can shape future listings. This is brilliant news because it adds that credibility factor to RLUSD for being used in IPOs for $1.15 billion. Ripple stated that this is the first public listing to put the settlement process on-chain, establishing a precedent for how stablecoins can influence future listings. This milestone remains significant in light of a recently passed Genius Act, as we talked about, which sets essentially guidelines for cryptocurrency tokens pegged to US dollars known as stablecoins, and is expected to boost their utility and pave the way for them to become an everyday means to make payments and move money. Ripple's USD stablecoin RLUSD launching globally in December 2024, initial exchanges such as Uphold, Bitso, MoonPay, Archex, and CoinMina before listed on a Bullish crypto exchange shortly thereafter. According to essentially CoinMarketCap's data, Bullish accounts for over 76% of RLUSD's trading volume, split across essentially different trading pairs, RLUSD to essentially USDC, XRP to RLUSD, SOL to RLUSD. In recent news, also, Mesh has announced the support for RLUSD, which we talked about in the past before, not in the past, but on Friday. But a company goes IPO, Bullish goes IPO, $1.15 billion, and essentially some of that money, or the majority of that money, was in RLUSD, which adds that credibility factor to essentially, it wasn't in USDT or USDC, it was in RLUSD. Adding on top of that, of essentially RLUSD and XRP Ledger and Ripple, bringing that credibility to the institutional sector as they always do. Gemini's IPO also. So not just Bullish's IPO with RLUSD involved, Gemini's IPO now. So where does Ripple fit into this matter of Gemini's IPO? The prospective public filing of Gemini is now a fact, and the company has secured the backing of the entity behind XRP and RLUSD. Gemini, the crypto exchange, Gemini Space Station Inc., the corporation behind Gemini Exchange, founded by essentially the Winklevoss twin brothers, filed an S1 form for essentially with the Securities Exchange Commission SEC today for its long-awaited initial public offering IPO. Within it, essentially, it's disclosed that they are entered into a credit agreement with Ripple, allowing them to make lending requests from time to time, with each one being no less than $5 million, up to initial commitments. Gemini has a lending agreement with Ripple while going IPO, where they can actually, lending and borrowing services up to $5 million, above $5 million. Anything below, not accepted. Also, in that sense, amount of $75 million, the sum may essentially vary slightly, but it will not exceed $150 million, and everything must be secured by collateral. If the expenses exceed the initial essential commitment, further funding at Ripple's discretion can be made possible in a dollar-denominated essential RLUSD stablecoin. All financing also bears an interest rate of 6.50% or 8.50%, which must be repaid in US dollars. The filing also notes that Gemini has been essentially harming their funds with a net loss increase of over 85% for the first half of 2025 compared to the same period last year. These represent a rise from essentially $41.4 million to essentially $282.5 million, respectively. The revenue also has taken a hit with the first half of this year, yielding $68.6 million compared to $74.3 million back in 2024. The enterprise plan, essentially, to make its public debut on the NASDAQ with the ticker symbol GEMI. If all goes well, it will be the third cryptocurrency exchange to list on the American stock markets and indexes, following Coinbase, which also entered the NASDAQ in 2021, and Bullish, which is also essentially backed by essentially the RLUSD, which rang the opening bell of New York Stock Exchange just last week. The Gemini crypto exchange, which essentially, while still prominent, is not as actively used as other industry peers. According to data from CoinMarketCap at the time of printing, it is ranked 24th in spot exchanges, leaderboards, and 16th from derivatives market spaces right now. CoinGecko has assigned a trust score of 9 out of 10 and has recorded over $220 million in trading activity just in the past 24 hours. So, Bullish Exchange went IPO. What did they use? What part of their essentially IPO money was in what? RLUSD. They could have used USDC. They could have used USDT. Why did they use RLUSD? Because it's a 10 times better stablecoin than USDC or USDT ever dreams of becoming, which also adds that credibility factor for other institutions to look at Bullish and go, that's interesting that they decided to go IPO and they used RLUSD. Also, CoinGecko, essentially also Gemini Exchange going public, third crypto exchange in the United States to go public, backed by Ripple in terms of lending for RLUSD and XRP. It adds so much credibility to Ripple, adds credibility to XRP Ledger, RLUSD, and XRP. On that sense of there's so much still happening behind the scenes that most people aren't aware of, but I am here always to share you that news so you are aware of what's happening behind the scenes, because on the scenes, the market might be going like this or like this, but behind the scenes, everything's falling into place. Credibility is being built. Foundation is being built. Regulations are being built. Institutions are entering, making moves. A lot of things are happening behind the scenes. On that note, we have reached the endings of tonight's live. This was the CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles. This was episode 357 of the CMF Live. In this live, you can tune in Monday, Friday, 10 p.m., where I share the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations, pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. The disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, thanks so much to everybody from the CMF that's essentially tuned in tonight and tunes in every night, Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. Honestly, love you all. And let's go through the comment section before we do call it a night. What's the difference between Ripple and XRP? One's a token, the other one's a company. RLUSD is the future. Let's go, Mal. Let's go, Ian. Facts. Great live as always. Thanks, Miles. Good night, and see you tomorrow, same time. Let's go, Autistic. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Night, Miles and CMF. Let's go, Pablo. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Great news, Miles. See you tomorrow. Free Velvet. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Good night, Miles and all CMF. Thank you for the great live and news. Let's go, JP. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Forever grateful for all you do for us endlessly, Miles. And a special thank you to the moderators. Good night and stay blessed, family. Let's go, Lena. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Good night, Miles, and good night, CMF. Funky brother. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. It's finally working. Let's go, Ian. Ian, see you tomorrow, same time as usual, and enjoy your vacation. Good night, Miles. I think people are blessed to know Miles and be able to listen to his advice. His live shows let us share his impressive opinion. Everything he says was later verified by the media. Let's go, Carl. Facts. Good night, Miles and CMF. Thank you for your support. Let's go, Mike. See you tomorrow, but same time as usual. Thanks, Miles. Good night, all. Let's go, Stormy. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thanks, Miles. Good night, CMF. See you tomorrow, or even see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Does Ripple own the XRP technology? Yes and no, but it's a good thing that they control certain aspects of it for later on. Maybe in the quantum, essentially, in the quantum world, quantum technology could be bad for the crypto space in the wrong hands. It could be good for in the right hands. But with Ripple always there to protect the XRP ledger, it's a brilliant thing in my opinion. Let's go XRP Army. Let's go Funky Brother. Good night, Miles and family. Great live. Brilliant, Miles. See you tomorrow. Let's go, Ian. See you tomorrow, brother. Same time as usual. I will see everybody tomorrow. Same time as usual. Thanks for your insights. Great live. Providing all the updates. Night and day, all CMF. Let's go, Shelly. Thanks so much as well. And honestly, thank you so much to everybody who has liked and retweeted this live on X, if you're watching this on X. If you watch this on YouTube, thank you so much to everybody who's liked the live as well. If you followed and subscribed to me during this live, thank you so much and welcome to the CMF. I love you all. I'll see you all tomorrow, same timing as usual, at 10 p.m. London time onwards for the next episode of CMF Live, which is episode 358. Night all. Let's go, CZ.